everybody. Welcome to the Aging Intelligence Podcast, where we talk to society's leaders about how they're helping us tackle the opportunities and challenges from the coming silver tsunami. I'm Seth Sternberg, co-founder and CEO of Honor, and today we have a very special guest. Most people know Mark Cuban as an entrepreneur, investor, shark, and a former, I think, owner of an NBA team. But what's interesting to me is the pattern underneath it all. So he started in basically consumer internet doing broadcast.com. Originally, I think it was called AudioNet. And then through entertainment, he ended up in healthcare. And this is a pattern that's interesting because I see it a lot in my peers in Silicon Valley. It's just that Mark is the OG. So he does AudioNet in 1995, which becomes broadcast.com, and he sells it to Yahoo in 99. He does kind of Shark Tank. He does Dallas Mavericks, probably a bunch of stuff I don't know about. But now he is doing a big healthcare play in cost plus drugs. And a lot of entrepreneurs who I know started in consumer internet, but have ended up in healthcare. So Sami at Verta, Ottman at Color, Adrian Aoun just sold Torch to OpenAI, Moonjal at Hippocratic, me at Honor. So Mark, I'm really curious. For some reason, this pattern just seems to happen again and again. And like I said, you are literally the OG. I was in college when you did AudioNet, and I was watching you jealously. So what made you go from I'm doing entertainment, I'm doing consumer, and all of a sudden, boom, like the hardest thing on planet Earth, I'm going to try to fix healthcare?
Just for that reason, the hardest thing on planet Earth, right? I mean, being in the technology industry for so long, that when you start, you have to start learning the technology. And that's one thing most people don't do. But once you have that foundation of understanding of the technology, as it evolves over time, it's not all that difficult to keep up with it if you put in the time. And because you have this foundation in technology and you're an entrepreneur, you look for problems to solve. When we started AudioNet in late 94, early 95, there were no streaming companies. And the whole mission was to be able to listen and then watch things over the internet. And, that came after my first company, Micro Solutions, where I taught myself to code. We did systems integrations for local and wide area networks. So that taught me about networking and integration and software, which led to streaming, which led to the first all high-def television network, which led to me using technology at the Mavs, which led to cost plus drugs and the manufacturing, leveraging robotics and AI. And so, when you have a tool like technology and you have an entrepreneurial problem solving mindset, you look for places where you can get the greatest bang for your buck. And there's no greater bang for your buck, as you know, than healthcare. And I say that not because it's okay, that's where you can make the most money, but more because that's where it's been distorted by so much misalignment, misinformation, and information asymmetry that there is a unique opportunity to have a social impact.
Totally. So I was actually going to ask you exactly that. So if you're let's call it a money-seeking entrepreneur, I think you probably wouldn't go healthcare.
No.
But if you're kind of a change mission-oriented entrepreneur, that's when you probably do go healthcare. So do you think that that's one of the reasons why the second timers seem to do it so frequently? It's they kind of got the money thing out of their system.
Yep, exactly right. Initially, if I was 25 or 35, this would be a whole different conversation, but now that, financially I'm set, I can look for different opportunities that, selfishly are rewarding to me, but they don't have to include economics.
Yep. And, the other thing I thought about when I was doing Honor, I had 3 other co-founders, and we said specifically in our case, we wanted to do something hard because we felt like we knew how to do hard problems since we were second timers, and we were more likely to actually be able to solve the problem. Did you have a similar version of that in your head? Hey.
Yeah, it's like Shark Tank. It was just another Shark Tank pitch, right? It was look, I've seen so many businesses, and you kind of get an understanding of the logic and the flow and where the difficult issues are. And, when I looked at healthcare, it's not like you look at the economics of healthcare and say, this is great. Maybe I can just optimize a little bit. You look at it and everybody hates it. And then you just ask the question, why? And it's pretty obvious. You have these huge players that do hundreds of billions of dollars, that have thousands of subsidiaries, that focus on Wall Street numbers. And that opens the door. And then on the flip side, you have patients that, can't afford their medications and, people don't care. And there's absolutely no transparency. So, it was a wide open door to walk through.
Yep. So, okay. So, let's go there in particular, because, I want to hear your theories on this, and then I'll give you the version we had 10 years ago when we started Honor. But, we looked at healthcare and we're like, oh my God, this is so entrenched and so hard. So, from where you started, what's the formula to fix something that's that entrenched, that broken? How do you actually go in and shake it up such that you can really make change?
You don't. You work on the outside, knowing that the entrenched people are not going to notice you initially. And then you can go right to the patients or the customers that they're excluding or ignoring. And that's exactly what we did. You don't have to, again, if I was younger and needed to make money, then you go in and it's a $5 trillion business. And if you just get a smidgen of that, and then you sell it because the acquirer thinks you're annoying, then, there's an opportunity. But when you, read stories, watch stories about people who are standing in line for their medications with a prescription and can't get them, can't afford them. I mean, they're saying they're a customer, right? And they just need somebody that they can work with. And then you look to see if there's a path where you can take care of them and provide what they need at a price that they need, at a service level they need. And if the answer is yes, and you can at least break even, then you go forward with it. And that's exactly how we approach costplusdrugs.com.
Totally. Okay. So this is it's super, super interesting that you have that theory. So what we said early on was healthcare is just an asteroid field. Doesn't matter if it's big or small, you hit an asteroid, you die. So we're going to try to create something on the outside of the asteroid field. And maybe someday we'll create something so big the gravity realigns the asteroid field.
My saying always is, when you run with the elephants, there's the quick and the dead, right? And you got to be quick, and you've got to be able to be agile and evolve very, very quickly. But the good news about it, because you're working outside the system and you're not having to deal with all their contractual issues and everything they want, you can move as quickly as you need to.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so can you explain to people, because I think most people probably don't understand this, what is just so broken about how drugs are sold today? And then how did Cost Plus Drugs work outside the system?
So you look to see who controls the customers, because whoever controls the customers has the leverage. And in pharmaceuticals, there's something called pharmacy benefit managers, and they contract with employers, and they say, look, we're going to help you manage how you utilize medications, and we'll go negotiate prices for you, and we'll manage all of that for you. Sounds great. And in doing so, three companies, they call them the big three PBMs, were able to aggregate about 85% of the patients. And then on the medical side, it's the insurance carriers that, maybe they don't have as much concentration, but they control patient flow for medical providers. But back to pharmacy. So because they have so much control of the patient flow, then they're able to go to brand manufacturers in particular and say, look, if you want access to those 100 plus million people, those 100 plus million patients or members, you're going to have to play by our rules. And those rules are, you're going to pay us to get access to what's called a formulary. A formulary is a list of the medications that your employer or your insurance plan has approved that they'll pay for if it's ever prescribed to you once they checked it over, right? And that is power. That is the ultimate power in the pharmacy business. They have so much power, they're able to say to the biggest brand manufacturers that if you don't follow our rules, we are not going to allow you to have access at the level you need in order to make the billions or tens of billions of dollars you need to make in sales. And we saw that when CVS kicked Lilly off their formulary. They basically said, you're not paying us enough. Novo is. Their GLP-1 stays, your GLP-1 goes. And so when that happens, you don't have an alignment between the people making the decisions on the formulary and the patients. because what happens is those pharmacy benefit managers, in order to when they auction off access to the formularies to the brand manufacturers, they effectively ask for payment in the form of what they call rebates. And even though that's a pure kickback, there's anti-kickback statutes that they have the ability, they don't have to follow them. They have an exemption for them. And so because of that, everything is ruled by the amount of rebates or fees that they get from the brand manufacturers, which again is out of alignment with patients, but gives them total control.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how that works. And then what's interesting about the cost plus play that you've done, and especially recently, so if it's like, hey, I'm going to operate outside of the ecosystem and I'm going to create something really big, and maybe then with that gravity, I'm going to realign it. It seems like in the last few days, you've started to do some of that, right? Like you announced, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, a Humana deal, right? And then you were just at the White House and you announced that you're going to help with the Trump RX thing. So what's happening right now? Like, have you gotten to a place where you're big enough that you feel like you're starting to realign
Not really.
things?
I mean, we're always trying to be lean and mean and the underdog, but to your point, we simplify things enough that it's hard to ignore us. And so whether it's Humana or Trump RX, where we're selling the drugs, we have an API. So with Trump RX, there wasn't any financial deal at all. We have an API and it's updated nightly. And if you want to present our medications on Trump RX, here you go, right? Humana, if you want to make any of our medications available to your members for internal or through your PBM where we can get you better prices, here you go. Where you get us better prices, we'll be a buyer, as opposed to a seller. Where we want to partner and sell directly to employers because a brand manufacturer wants to work around the PBMs, let's go. Happy to do it. And so, I think because we're flexible and just try to optimize wherever we can and we're transparent, people trust us. And I think more than scale, it's trust that's really driven us.
Yeah, that's really great. It's funny. I was having a call earlier today with someone who runs a company that kind of sells to employers, and they need a back end for caregiving in homes. And they said, how could we send, people's addresses or whatever to you that when you're caregiving in? And I said, we have an API.
Right. Yeah. Here you go. Right.
Send it over.
Yeah. Send us a file. We'll upload those accounts and away we go.
Yep. That's super awesome. Okay. So then I wonder if, you've been very, very focused, obviously, in the drugs part of fixing healthcare. Healthcare is so broken everywhere, right?
Yes.
Do you kind of look at area like services, for example, healthcare services, and have in your mind, like, man, if someone would just do this, like, like you're kind of trying to fix basically the drug cost PBM rebate problem in drugs. What would someone do in healthcare services to fundamentally fix it over there?
Well, I think you have to look at the structural problems first. And that's really what we try to address are the structural problems. So when there's an information asymmetry, it's due to a lack of transparency, right? And so with costplusdrugs.com, when you go to our site, put in the name of the medication, that's one of the thousands we carry, we're going to show you our actual cost. And then we're going to show you our markup is only 15%. When you have transparency and you show your self-interest, which is only 15%, people trust you. And so when I look at that, those structural items across all of healthcare, that's where, you really start to get an understanding of what's wrong and then what you can layer on top of it. I mean, totally. Humana is mostly in government plans, but if you look at it on the commercial side, as an example, everything starts with the commercial plan. 60-some% of employees are covered by self-insured employers, and 80% of employees are covered by it's 160 million people are covered by self-insured employers, and 80% of those. But in any event, when you look at all that, you start to realize that it all starts with the plan and the deductible.
Yeah.
And when people can't afford their deductible, it all starts to fall apart, right? Because now all of a sudden, the provider has to loan them money so they can get to the insurance company money. And so now we've turned the provider into a subprime lender. And then from there, you get all the delays, the denials, right? Even though those providers and insurance plans have to show their pricing on their websites, that doesn't mean that's the amount that they yield, right? And so, again, a lot of the commercial insurers will underpay, late pay, clawback, delay, deny, and play all these games to maximize or minimize the loss ratios. And on the other side of the coin, reduce the yield for the provider. So when it comes to services, I think the first thing you have to look at is where are the sticky points and where are the challenges in the structural issues. And so what we've done is said, look, we're going to talk to all these providers and ask them how they feel about the commercial payers. And they hate them all, right? There's no love lost whatsoever. And when you see that, just like disintermediating the PBMs from the patients and selling direct to them and being transparent, we started realizing that providers don't want to deal with commercial payers either, for all the reasons I just mentioned. You may have a contract that says a hip replacement is $25,000. When it's all said and done, you might get $20,000 if you're lucky, and you'll get it way late. And so what we really started working on, and it applies to services and all elements, is direct contracting between employers and providers. Because there's if you can get an independent TPA who can handle the claims processing, between the claims processing and the care navigation and care management and utilization, there's lots of independent TPAs that can do all that for you, and there's providers. I'd rather have a provider do my formulary and do my utilization management than an insurance company, right? And so we created a website, an open source website called costpluswellness.com. And the whole mission is to allow companies, providers, to post their contracts for direct contracting with employers. And we decided to do this because we did it for my companies first. And so when I went to these providers and said, look, we'll trust our doctor, because it's crazy that the plan put together the network and approves the doctors and then doesn't trust them and denies most of what they request, right?
Right.
And then, they can't afford the deductible. And so they put the credit out, the debt obligation, and turns them into a lender. That just reduces the yield and the net revenue for the provider. So we said, we'll work directly with you. I just want two things. I want a much better price because I'm going to pay you on time, and I'm going to make sure I take the credit risk for my members so you don't have to worry about it. So I want a better price. And two, I want to be able to take this contract and I want to be able to post it on costpluswellness.com so anybody else can use it. And that's what we've been doing. So going back to services, what we're telling service companies, no matter what the service is on or whatever it may be, go ahead and post your contract so that employers can see it. You don't have to worry about the brokers as middlemen, the consultants as middlemen, the payers. Everybody that's offering services thinks, well, I'll just go to the payers and I'll just get $1 or $2 per month per member, and everybody will be happy, without realizing they're one of hundreds doing the exact same thing. And totally. So what we want to do is eliminate the friction between an employer and a provider, no matter what the service they're providing, so that there's a direct relationship financially and from a support perspective.
Yeah, that's so smart. It's it's really interesting. You tell me if I've got this framework right or wrong, but when, another thing that we thought about early on in Honor's history was we didn't want to ever be beholden to a monopoly or an oligopoly.
Amen.
And and it's just like the payers are an oligopoly, right? And it's like, okay, not going to go down that route. So we launched private pay. I mean, we do over $2 billion in GMV, and it's all private pay out of pocket.
Amen.
And it's because we just don't want those oligopolies controlling what people can actually do. What's really interesting about what you just said is you found a way within healthcare to kind of remove the oligopoly step.
Completely.
Right. And you're creating a direct connection and creating a marketplace between employers and providers. That strikes me as like a really, really brilliant move.
Well, it's not even a business for us. It's just open source.
Sure.
At some point, it can be a business potentially. And look, we're not saying that you're immediately going to go direct for all your contracts for all your healthcare needs, right? You're going to have to do carve-outs to start. You're going to walk before you run. You're going to have to get a TPA that is educated on this and learns. But if you start with, one office in one city, then you grow it from there, the savings are incredible. And, the providers, initially they were a little bit hesitant, but they wanted my business. Then they wanted to be able to, put me on the resume. But now they're saying their yields are up dramatically with our business, right? Which means I'm going to negotiate lower prices next time through, but still they're happy about it. And they gave me an example. One of the hospitals said, to show you how discombobulated the whole thing is, they had one patient who had a lot of specific needs and challenges, but one patient from the time they, brought him in and onboarded him to the time they released him from the hospital had 37 pre-authorizations. 37, and they wouldn't even tell me how many of those were denied. Right?
Oh my God.
And that just reflects how much overhead and administrative costs are associated with just dealing with the oligopoly, like you mentioned. And so, by removing that and creating a path, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, we only launched this in January, but slowly but surely it's getting some momentum.
Totally. Well, that's super awesome. And I'm curious, when you start, I guess one other question, starting Cost Plus Drugs is just, you've come such a long way. You've figured out now how to kind of start embedding and really changing the system. What was one of the biggest assumptions you had early on that you've now realized was wrong? It's like you thought it would be this way. It turned out it was actually that way.
We thought the brands would love to work with us because, we would give them just more access to patients. Sell your product for less money and, patients will be happier and you'll make more money. You can sell it to us, not at your lowest price, sell it at a higher price. Dead wrong. Dead wrong.
Why?
Because the PBMs came in and said, because costplusdrugs.com shows their cost and their markup, we don't want anybody to know even close to be able to approximate what our selling price is, right? Or our net cost is. And by only marking it up 15%, they're going to undercut us. And they figured out early on that we become the benchmark pricing for all generics that we have available. And that cut their margins on what they called specialty generics, which were just a pill, right? There was no difference. And even to this day, we've cut their margins. And so by so what they said to the brands was, if you work with costplusdrugs.com, we will diminish your positioning on our formularies, not just for the drugs you work with them on, but for your entire portfolio. And, the CEOs just say to me, we love you, but,
too risky. Yeah.
Yeah. But the good news is, they recognize that there was a problem. It took them a few years. And that's one of the things we're working with Centerwell on, because we're going to be working direct to employers, working with the Lillies of the world for GLP-1s and others to say, okay, let's set up an arrangement between Cost Plus Drugs and Centerwell and the employer so that they can buy directly through Cost Plus. Centerwell will fulfill it, right? And they'll save money, and the brand manufacturer will be able to work around the PBM.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's one thing I would just want to make sure anybody listening understands and what you're saying. So I'm going to repeat it. Tell me if I get anything wrong. When you're talking about the people who feared you'd take away their margin, it's not the people who are creating the drugs, discovering the drugs, producing the drugs. You are not hurting them in any way or taking away their margin. And we need those guys to keep doing what they're doing because we want to solve more disease. You are literally talking about a middleman gearbox thing, usually owned by an insurer.
Somebody who had inserted themselves in the middle and were capturing these rebates purely because they dominated the number of accounts, number of members that they had connected to them. That's it. That was it.
They are like a services provider between companies that consumers actually never even know exist or really even touch.
And they just extract as much margin as they possibly can. And they'll tell you they're the only ones negotiating prices with the brand manufacturers to keep prices low. But, the immediate retort is to ask anybody, how much they would have to pay for Xarelto during their deductible phase. You have to pay your full list price during your deductible phase. And if, these big PBMs are doing such a great job negotiating with the brands, why is it that the employers that they're working with, their employees have to pay full list price? When if it went through costplusdrugs.com, it would just be the net cost plus 15%. And, patients could save, who knows how much, billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, awesome. So this has been like incredibly educational. I want to turn now over to kind of the topic of older adults in general. So older adults, of course, are the number one utilizer of the healthcare ecosystem in general.
Sure.
My guess is they're probably your number one customer segment if you were to look at
In
your
the
over
60s,
60.
yeah, in the 60s, kind of like retirement to Medicare.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So that's what I was thinking. And so for us, for example, we kind of get involved when people are in the old. So our average age is actually 78. So it's even older. And I'm wondering in particular, like, what are the top issues that you see in your business around older adults and prescription drugs in general? Like, is that a category that you track? It's like, hey, what do we do about this? There are issues. There's product that we have to go build here.
We don't really try to do data analytics to try to understand that, because what drives our business is just being the low cost provider. And
so as long as you can be,
that's the key for us, right? And there's going to be circumstances where we're not the best solution. And look, even when we work with employers and we say, okay, add cost plus drugs to your network of pharmacies, we don't have a contract with them. We just say, if we're the lowest price, great. If we're not,
that's awesome.
Great.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. No contracting. So super simple. It's just price.
Whatever we can do, and service too, right? And comfort and trust. And I think the thing that really defines us the most, and I said this right when I took over, it was like, okay, we're starting this company, we're hiring these people, and they all have experience in the pharmaceuticals industry, and they all want to know, how many salespeople are we hiring and how much are we spending on marketing and promotion? I'm like, zero. We're not spending a penny.
It's amazing.
Because we're not in the pharmaceutical business, we're in the trust business. Because once somebody realizes they can save hundreds of dollars a month or more, they're going to tell everybody they know with that same disease state. They're going to tell their doctor, who's now going to prescribe it to people who otherwise can't afford it. And we're going to get referrals, and we're going to grow organically. And that's exactly what's happened. And so if we just try to scale, that's why we did, we were excited about Trump RX picking up our API, simply because it would grow our volumes. And when our volumes grow, our costs go down. When our costs go down, we still just market at 15%. And that just, it's a self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So how should someone, because, a bunch of people who will be listening to this either are on Medicare or MA, or they work with people who are on Medicare or on MA. So how should people in that sphere think about cost plus?
So a couple things. It really depends what plan you have. And so if you have traditional Medicare Part D plan, you're getting that from a private insurance company. If you have Medicare Advantage, you're getting that from a private insurance company. If you have an ACA plan, you're getting that from a private insurance company. And so you have to look at your actual plan. And anytime you have a new medication that you have to figure out what's going on with, then you have to determine how you pay for it. Is there a copay? Is there co-insurance, right? Is it not covered at all? Do you need a pre-authorization? Is there step therapy? You need to go through the process of understanding exactly what's going on economically, not just medically. And once you have that, then you may be on, like, I'll give you a perfect example, TRICARE for the VA. If you happen to be living off base and want to go to a retail store, the copay for most, $20 and under drugs is higher through TRICARE than it is just to buy it outright plus shipping from Cost Plus Drugs. There are lots of Medicare Advantage plans, as some of the rules have changed and some of the requirements have changed, that they've moved drugs from one tier to another. So from as you go through a new open enrollment and you re-up with your Medicare Advantage plan, you have to check again, because we get a lot of patients who say, oh my goodness, it was a $10 copay, now it's co-insurance and I'm paying 25% of a whack price. I don't even know what that whack price is, right? And you go to the pharmacy counter and you're just stunned. And so anybody who has any type of insurance plan, no matter what it would be, then you want to check to see what your rules are for your plan, then compare if we're cheaper. And then also, now this is getting a little bit inside baseball, if it's a plan, because of the settlement between the FTC and Express Scripts and Optum, there's a rule that says if it's a cash pay that's available on Trump RX, which we now are, then they have to count it against your deductible.
Oh, that's a big change.
That's a big change. And then there's 8 states led by Texas, Indiana, and Tennessee that in many cases, medical or pharmaceutical, they have to count your cash pay against your deductible. And we're going to be adding some logic and to our website where it'll automatically go check for you to see if you're eligible. But the point is, it's more complicated than you hope it to be, particularly for somebody who's older. It may not be as computer literate or comfortable, but that's the steps you have to take. You need to really understand what it's going to cost you for each medication and how that relates to your out-of-pocket max. So, because there's the $2,100 this year. And, if it's a $50 drug or $50 coinsurance and you can get it from us for $10, well, you're not going to hit your out-of-pocket max. You're not going to hit your $2,100 limit. So it's cheaper to work through us. If on the flip side, it's $1,000 and you would hit it in 2 months, you want to make sure that you can apply it to your deductible so that you don't lose anything as a result.
Yep. So to make it really simple for anyone who's listening, basically what they should really do is they should look at what their current behavior is. Like, I'm getting, drugs from a pharmacy using whatever my insurance is. I should probably also cross shop on cost plus drugs.
Yeah.
And then what I need to be aware of though, is how does this interface with my deductible? Right. Because if there's some really expensive drug over here, I might want to do that through the normal process just to get to that deductible very quickly.
Yeah. And as much as I want them to come to costplusdrugs.com, if you're working with an independent pharmacy, typically not one of the big chains, but if you're working with an independent pharmacy and you just ask your pharmacist at the counter if there's a time you can come to go through it with them, they are so good about working with patients. That last 5 feet at the pharmacy counter is some of the most important in all of medicine. And so, if you've got a truly independent pharmacist, they'll take that time and work with you. And we're okay if you don't buy from Cost Plus Drugs, as long as you get the service that you need. And particularly for somebody older or elderly who's not comfortable doing all this searching, then that's somewhere you can really get help.
That's awesome. Okay. Very, very cool. And then I guess, what is it, if we kind of turn toward the future now, what do you now believe that 10 years ago you didn't? Like the aha revelation about, health in general, healthcare and how we're building
AI,
yeah.
AI.
Okay, AI all day long.
All day long, right? I mean,
why?
All those questions we just discussed. If somebody, no matter how old you are, is comfortable using, Claude AI or ChatGPT or Gemini, you could take the PDF or the web page and plug it in there and just start asking it questions. And it'll give you 9 out of 10 times, it'll give you accurate answers, which is probably more than you're going to get from the insurance company itself. Yep. And it'll be able to help you there. I have a thyroid condition, and so I have to take Synthroid, and I needed to up my iron levels.
Me too, by the way, as it turns out.
Right. And I needed to get my iron levels up, and I was just taking them all together, and then I put all my information into Claude, and it said, no, you can't do that. You can't, take those two things together. And so even though they're not perfect, it's like having 24-hour access to a doctor who's a friend who'll give you top of mind information, but you still got to use your doctor. Have
you thought about turning that around as a product? Because this is actually one of the things I was thinking. We deal with this all the time. One of the number one reasons an older adult has to leave their home, even in our care, ends up being something about drugs. It's too complicated, too many. It's kind of the polypharmacy problem. We've thought about how could we help rectify this, but if you have all this information on what drugs people are taking or buying from you, have you thought about trying to do something around med reconciliation or anything like that?
Yeah, but that takes us away from our business, right? So
it's too far afield.
Yeah, so we'll partner, typically you don't do that. Typically, obviously, we ask for all the information before we fill a script, right? And so we have pharmacies look at everything like any traditional pharmacy. But it's tough for us to try to offer all those services and still be the low cost provider. We'd rather, have them go on cost plus wellness, somebody who does adherence support or whatever it may be, and post it there. And then from time to time, as we partner with people, we'll post what they do to help some of our patients, help our customers. But, the more we get far afield, the more we have, to raise our prices. And that's the risk.
Yeah, that's super cool. And by the way, I just want to circle back around from purely self-interest point of view. Did you just say that you can't take Synthroid and iron at the same time?
Yeah. There has to be
I do that. I should stop doing that.
You should stop that. Yeah. So here's the hard lesson I learned. I would just take a sip of water with my Synthroid. Not going to cover it. You got to drink the full 6 ounces or more. And you have to have 4 hours before or after your Synthroid to take iron.
Okay, this is good. Good news. Accidentally, I take the iron at night and I take Synthroid in the morning. So, okay.
You're good. Yeah, you're good.
I got to go talk to Claude about this. Okay. Well, we're a little short on time, so I have 2 more questions for you that hopefully we can get through. So, you've been an entrepreneur for a very, very long time. Like I said, you really are the OG. But you haven't lost the spark. Like you keep going. You still have the energy, which is amazing. So two more question. How do you choose what problems to work on?
Wherever I think I can have the greatest impact.
Okay. Your impact, you can do it, other people can't.
Right. Where I can have the impact and do things I think other people may not be able to do, and I can have fun doing it. And I get to compete, because what drives me is just being competitive. It's just like a sport, and to be able, I used to be the youngest in the room. Now I'm not. And so that's also the motivation.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. And here's the last one. And dig deep on this one. I ask everybody interview this, if they're going to be on my team, my direct reports. Why is it that you are who you are? What in your childhood or the way you were raised, what made you into the person that you are today that gives you wake up and you have all this energy and you could just go to the beach all the time, right? How do you become you?
I'm curious. My parents just instilled, the idea of keep learning, always be curious. And you can, if you set your mind to it, you can do it.
And did your parents just drill that in? What did it? Because there are people here who want to know how to get their kids to be like you.
My dad did upholstery on cars. He went to work at 6 a.m, got home at 7 p.m, a short day on Saturday. My mom did odd jobs, and it was always, okay, Mark, they didn't go to college. So it wasn't let us mentor you, let us help you, or friends can help you or mentor you. It was you got to figure out everything, Mark. But my mom was always about being curious. Read this, right? Here's an encyclopedia for your birthday present. And I loved it, right? And to this day, curiosity, particularly in an AI world, is probably the greatest skill that you can have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Well, Mark, I know you got to run to your next meeting. Thank you so much for taking time to come to the podcast. I'm sure this will be super interesting for everybody who gets to listen to it.
I had a great time. Thanks for having me, Seth.
All right, man. Take care.
Uh-huh.